Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today, a weekly podcast exploring the science and culture of the emerging psychedelic field with your hosts Kyle Buller and Joe Moore. Today on the show, I get to chat with Greg Kieser. Greg is the founder of supersystemic.ly or Supersystemically, a Brooklyn-based think tank and angel investment firm dedicated to increasing humanity's readiness for the emergence of superintelligent entities through the study and spread of supersystemic perspectives and innovations. Greg has previously oversaw a portfolio of technology innovatives at a New York City-based poverty fighting foundation, and he's also the author of the book Dear Machine, a letter to a super aware intelligent machine, which sets the course for the symbiosis with super intelligent machines. And Greg has also is an investor in psychedelic medicines and is helping out on that front as well. So today on the show, we get to chat about, some of the pros and cons of super intelligence and artificial intelligence. What benefit could they bring to us? And then what are some of the downsides of this? Thinking back to our other episode with Dr. Sam Gandy, talking about interconnectedness, how psychedelics can play a role in helping us connect more with nature, and then also this idea of loneliness and disconnection that might come from technology, and who knows what will come from AI and some of this super intelligence. Some of these new machines that people are becoming more interested in science, and the pros of that, what that could do: free up time, maybe help us dedicate a little bit more time on more creative endeavors, such as I brought up in the episode, spend more time gardening. That would be awesome. So there's definitely pros and cons to super intelligence and to the AI in general, just the technology, the evolution, but I think we all have to stay open-minded about it. We don't know what the future brings, and I don't know, what can we do to prepare for that? And I think Greg proposes here that, psychedelics could help us prepare for that. New ways of thinking, helping to break down systems and rebuild new systems. We talk about the blockchain and how that can really help with developing new systems and whatnot. So yeah, we get into a lot in this episode. We also chat a little bit about Greg's investment in psychedelic medicines, specifically with Compass. I know that's been a hot topic within the psychedelic community, and there's a lot of mixed emotions there. Still don't know where I fall on that. There's definitely a lot of mixed emotions as well. But, I think looking at the ultimate goal of really helping to fund these studies to help alleviate suffering, I think that is a really great goal. And yeah, these topics are complicated, and I guess, I don't know. I guess I really need to dig more into some of the backstories there and whatnot. But, I align with that goal that, these studies cost lots of money and lots of time, lots of resources, and, really orient towards that goal that, we need to work towards new creative problem solving skills. We need to come up with new creative solutions. We need to, really incorporate any tool, technology, medicine that can help alleviate suffering in the world and, help us live better and healthier lives. So that's where I stand. And, I think, the more people being able to do research like this, the better. We can really get the movement going and help legitimize these things. But I am also very aware of some of the other concerns that people have. I think Joe and I are planning on doing an episode in the future about Compass and some things like that. So stay tuned. I hope you enjoy this episode with Greg Kieser. Had a really fun time chatting with him, and just so interesting. Some of the philosophical notions and questions of AI and super intelligent machines, and where are we going as a species? I don't know, but it's exciting to think about and just always fun to chat about. And then towards the end, Greg also chats a little bit about microorganisms and microbiome, which, I think there's a huge connection there with mental health and the gut-mind relationship. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and we'll catch you on the other side. So just a little bit of updates, news. If you're interested in our Navigating Psychedelics courses, Joe and I will be hosting our general class in the fall. We'll have 2 dates for that, and then the therapist course in the fall as well. We'll have 2 dates for that. You can learn more information at psychedelicstoday.com, go to online courses, and then you can check out the one that you're interested in, whether that's the general course or the therapist course. So our enrollment is open for those courses. I would sign up if you're interested as soon as you can. You'll get an early bird discount up until I think mid-August, end of August, and our therapist course sold out. So if you want to get in there early, reserve your spot. The seats are limited to 12 seats. So if you're interested in learning more about psychedelics, harm reduction, safety, integration, and just to be able to join a community, an online group, and just really chat about all the nuances of psychedelics, definitely join our course. Check it out at psychedelicstoday.com. Check out online courses. If you want to support the show, subscribe to iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Click the subscribe button so you get all the updates when we come out with a new episode. If you're feeling called to it, leave a review on iTunes, Facebook, wherever that is. One way to really help us out is to share the podcast post. Share the podcast on Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter. Just retweet something. Maybe you like an image on Instagram, repost that. Sharing just really helps generate, the word about what we're doing. And so if you really enjoy what we're doing here at Psychedelics Today, I think sharing is the best way to support the project, just to help get the word out there for folks. If you want, we also have a Patreon, patreon.com/psychedelicstoday, and also a donate page, psychedelicstoday.com/donate. So those are some ways to support us. And I think that's it on my end. And enjoy the show. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. Today on the show, I have Greg Kieser, founder of supersystemic.ly and the author of a book called Dear Machine. Thanks so much for joining us, Greg. Kind of excited to chat with you.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Not kind of. I am excited. I don't know why I always slip in those little weird words here and there.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Do you want to give a background about who you are and what some of the work you do for the listeners?
Sure. So I worked for a long time at a foundation in New York City for poverty. We invested in programs, poverty-related programs, everything from homeless shelters to food kitchens, to job training programs, et cetera, with the intent of reducing the rate of poverty through improving financial well-being and health and mental health, et cetera. And so that involved job training programs. It involved helping mothers work with their children and get nutrition for children who otherwise might have difficulty, especially when parents are working long hours, et cetera. And it involved after-school programs and educational programs, et cetera. I left there 2 years ago after doing a little bit of crypto stuff and playing that whole thing and getting a little lucky. And I started an angel investment firm, what I'm calling an angel investment firm, a think tank called supersystemic.ly or supersystemically. And I recently released a book called Dear Machine to essentially highlight create a thesis for the company. So I was in search of a purpose, I guess, after I left my job, something I really wanted to contribute something meaningful. And this is kind of what I came up with, the company and the book.
Awesome. So I was just listening on the audiobook, Dear Machine, and, you outlined some really interesting points. And, I think there's a huge overlap here with psychedelics and just like where things are going with technology, what consciousness is, and just this idea of super intelligence or, as you put it, a super aware intelligent machine, or maybe other people think of it as like AI, artificial intelligence. But, I think you took a really interesting approach with this book, like writing a letter to this machine. when I'm thinking about that, it just seems even just like a psychedelic process in itself. It's like, what would I
Sure.
say to a machine here? And, what type of questions would I ask and all this stuff. So really interesting approach there.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was when I stumbled kind of upon that idea of doing it in this way. I got really excited about it, obviously, because I think it gave me this whole new way of talking about my hypotheses of interconnectedness and diversity and complexity and stuff like that.
Do you want to give the listeners a little bit of background about the book, like an overview of what your thesis is there and what you're trying to get
sure.
at?
Yeah, so it's a letter to a future super intelligent entity under the idea that sometime in the next 10 to 20 to 30 years, machines will have super intelligence. So presumably intelligence greater than any human in any and all disciplines. That's essentially how they define it. Just a note, I don't have a fetish with robots or AI or, it's more of kind of an exploration of what intelligence means, and also what if we ourselves together collectively had just a better system that represented our collective intelligence, what are the types of questions that we would ask and what types of solutions would we come up with? And so in doing so, writing this letter to the super intelligent entity, I hypothesized about what this super intelligent entity would come up with as ways to help humanity through these difficult times that we're going through. And what I honed in on is this idea that over the past 10,000 years, there's been an enormous amount of monoculturization of everything, of farms, of our minds, of our guts, of microbes, et cetera, of everything around us has been monoculturized because that's how humans solve problems, or how we have solved problems since we left the forest 10,000 years ago. So the overarching idea is that a super intelligent entity would then say, well, actually, if you reverse some of this monoculturization, you can improve life dramatically for humanity. And so that's kind of where it goes.
Yeah. I like how in the beginning you kind of went through the evolution, like, dear machine, here's our evolution as humans, and this is how things have progressed over time. It was just, I don't know, a good background for me to even hear, and just the focus on agriculture and food and, all that stuff I found really interesting.
Yeah, when I was unpacking that stuff, I mean, I learned a lot through this process as well. I mean, for example, when we went from scavengers to hunter-gatherers and then hunter-gatherers to farmers, actually life, our nutrition got very, very narrow when we became farmers after being hunter-gatherers. And as a result, we started to have teeth problems. We started to have, we got smaller during that period. Then we also, the rate of death of babies went up, even if we ended up having more babies, because we didn't have to carry them around as much because we became stationary. So we had all these issues, and that's something I didn't realize when I started this process, but I thought that was very interesting. And, I was kind of, I think there's a tendency to look at the past and kind of glamorize it or kind of think about what if we could live like that again? But, the truth is that we can't go back where we came from. We have to go to a new place. So how do we do that?
Yeah, and that's such an interesting question, and kind of tying it into psychedelics. It's, I think a lot of people, especially with like more of the plant medicines, ayahuasca and mushrooms, they feel really connected to the earth and almost kind of maybe has like this romanticism about wanting to go back to these life styles. And it's always this like balance of how far can we go back, or what type of I guess like rituals or skills could we incorporate here? And then also this more philosophical question of where are we going and what is our species and who are we becoming, right? And so are we the stewards of the land that should just be more, I guess, nomad and trying to take care of areas, or are we actually kind of merging with technology in a different way? And, is part of our goals to leave this planet and maybe to do other exploring? So it's a really interesting thing that has come through. I mean, questions that I think about when I'm in those states or doing breath work or whatnot, it's like, who are we and what are we doing here and where are we going and how are we fusing technology with who we are? I mean, I don't know. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, I usually, at the beginning, I definitely, I mean, I have a back to the land kind of mentality as well, even though I haven't done it. I like gardening and working in the soil and so forth. And I kind of have tempered at the beginning, I was kind of like, I need to buy this huge plot of land and transform it, and that's my purpose and so forth. But then once you realize, how many people we have living in cities now, and the difficulty of delivering food and getting food to cities, and uh, you know, it's obvious that we have to come up with solutions that also serve that need as well. I do think there's going to be a certain amount of ruralization or people moving back to the country and so forth, but it's not going to be enough to empty out the city. So at the end of the day, we have to come up with solutions that work with cities as well. And so that's kind of how I think, we absolutely need technology to a certain degree. So it's just a matter of making the best use of the technology and allowing us to feel that kind of freedom that we think, or perhaps we did as hunter-gatherers, and perhaps we did as farmers, et cetera, but just more freedom than most people are experiencing now with the 9 to 5 and the cost of things continually going up and having to work more and more and more and that stuff.
Yeah. It's interesting. You brought up gardening, and I've been planting a garden for the past 3 years, and every time I'm out there just doing weeding, I just want to expand it every year. And there's just something so therapeutic about it, whereas like, this feels so right. I wish I could have a big plot of land and just, not have a small farm to feed just like a nice little homestead. And there's just something so right about it at times.
Definitely. I mean, if you think about we evolved for so many millions of years to be in a forest or be interacting with plants and soil and stuff like that. And in fact, we now know that there are benefits just to interacting with soil. You improve your immune system, especially for children that are interacting with, that grow up on a farm and playing with dirt and playing with pets and animals and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to see how the mental connects to the physical and all that stuff. And I'm a big fan of microbes and of furthering our kind of understanding of how microbes work and so forth. And I think that's a big microbes. I think like psychedelics are a way that we can easily kind of come to understand how interconnected everything is. They're like the kind of the entities of interconnectedness, that very real stuff.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And I actually just wrapped recording. We posted an episode 2 weeks ago, I believe, or 3 weeks ago, with Dr. Sam Gandy, who's from the Beckley Foundation, and we were chatting about these studies that I guess suggest the connection that's increased to nature under the influence of psychedelics. And we got in this huge conversation about like loneliness and disconnection, and how, psychedelics are a potential tool to help us increase this feeling of connectedness and knowing that we're connected and everything is kind of connected there. And something about those transpersonal experiences can really help us understand that interconnectedness there. And we're not these individual little things that's separate of nature. Yeah.
Yeah, with Dear Machine, I definitely tried to unpack the kind of the scientific evidence that really shows how interconnected everything is. From our microbes in our guts to the microbes in the soil to the ideas that kind of proliferate through our societies and so forth, and kind of thinking about that interconnectedness and unpacking that sort of stuff. So it's interesting to, and I agree with what you're saying here, is that psychedelics actually help us see that interconnectedness as well, which is, they're in such a unique class for that, a class of medicines, I guess you would call them, for their capacity to do that. And obviously, indigenous folks have known this for many thousands of years, and it's just, we're finally waking up in the West to these ideas, which is really exciting.
Yeah. I guess, where do you see like the integration of technology in our evolution? Like, if you were to envision, I don't know, 20, 50 years, 100 years from now, like, how do you see technology integrated into the human species, and how would we be utilizing it?
Yeah, I haven't, in terms of like the brain interfaces and stuff like that, I don't give too much thought to that stuff. I think it's probably inevitable. But what's really exciting for me is is the use of blockchains specifically for their capacity to take data, and our data, the data actually belongs to us that we currently give away to Facebook and Google and so forth, and to pull it out into this place where we can have more control over it, and it can't be monetized so easily, and we can't be bought, sold, and so forth, and we can't be reliant on these platforms that, whose only goal is to buy and sell information, and therefore they throw out this mess of knowledge and stuff that really doesn't help us, and build systems that really allow us to evolve more gracefully, I guess, and systems that allow us to share knowledge that actually has a lot of value to us. Because I know, we're starting to see this stuff emerge through Facebook and social media and so forth, but I don't think they have the capacity to really take it to scale in a way that would really serve humanity. And I think that's where the blockchain aspect comes in. And again, on the blockchain front, I'm excited about the prospect of taking all the knowledge about how our money is spent, either by corporations or by governments and so forth, and making that very, very visible to us so that we understand when we buy a product or when we vote, et cetera, we know exactly, or we have a much better sense of where our money is going, so that we can have much more control over the world. And I think if we do that, if we combine that with psychedelics, we combine that with kind of AI that's helping us, we combine that with deeper knowledge of microbes and expanding science in that space, I think we'll accelerate this, our evolution very quickly. And I hope that we'll kind of hit a point in the next 10 to 20 years where that kind of stuff really starts to accelerate. And people like me and you who are ahead of the game will be like, oh yeah, we've been saying that forever. This is how it's going. This is the utopia we were hoping for.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm too optimistic, but that's kind of where I'm going with it.
No, I feel pretty optimistic too. And, some stuff about the blockchain is really exciting. And, there's definitely some platforms out there that give me hope about kind of transforming our thoughts about money. It's almost kind of more of a gifting type of economy, like getting returns on what you're putting out there. Like platforms like Steam It. I used to be on there a little bit more, but being able to post and then kind of being able to get something in return for that's kind of a cool idea. But I'm curious, I don't know how many people know what the blockchain is. I'm sure people know what Bitcoin is and this and that, but could you give a little background about what the blockchain is for people that might not know?
Yeah, so sure. So the blockchain is the underlying technology in Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, the creator of Bitcoin, Satoshi Nakamoto, whether it's a person or multiple people, created this technology. It's a very simple technology, but essentially what they did was they created this way of having a database that lives not on somebody's server inside of a company or inside of a government or somebody's basement, but a database that lives out on the internet that anybody can interact with, given tokens and so forth. And the first application of that was Bitcoin. The idea that you're transferring you're transferring money from one person to another person in order to kind of track money and so forth. That was the first application, but essentially it's a database that can live up in space, up on the internet. And it was the first time this ever existed. And that offers enormous amount of opportunities in terms of efficiencies and so forth. And again, when I talk about the blockchain and Facebook, this offers us the opportunity to take all that data that exists at Facebook and put it into a public sphere and give us control over the actual little pieces of data that we have, so that we're not throwing everything out there to be monetized by Facebook. In terms of government, it means taking all the databases about government spending and titles and who owns what, et cetera, and putting that into the public sphere as well, where it belongs, so that we can monitor government in a much more effective manner and kind of really understand where our tax money is going, et cetera.
Yeah, really interesting. Starting to get a little bit more into blockchain and the potential there, and it is exciting. It seems it almost makes things a little bit more decentralized and also maybe a little bit more democratic at times.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I at the same time, I know that speculation right now, the markets, the cryptocurrency markets are insanely speculative. So the prices go up and down all the time, and you have of course, anything when there's an opportunity to make profit, there are a lot of sharks that come out into the waters and so forth. And that's definitely the case now. But at the same time, all this speculative activity is actually funding the creation of some really, really interesting projects in terms of, how we can reshape, our governments and money and kind of everything. I mean, we're really, at the end of the day, transactional databases are kind of in between every transaction that we do nowadays, and having that in a public sphere is really exciting.
Right. Yeah. And not just the application with money, right? With the blockchain. Like I was following one for a while. What was it? VChain, or I think they converted to Thor. But, tracking goods, like, and just like using the blockchain technology to track from production to sale, and just to make that all automated, and the checks and balances are there, right? Where things won't go missing necessarily, like, where that transaction happened. And
yeah, that aspect is very interesting. Another one that I'm kind of hoping to get involved with in the next couple of weeks is called regen.network. And essentially it's a blockchain that will facilitate the regeneration of land. So if somebody has 100 acres of land, so it's sort of like a Kickstarter for regeneration of land. And so what people will do is if somebody has 100 acres of land, they want to regenerate it, they'll put this project up on this blockchain and with the specific details of how they want to regenerate it, plant X number of trees, create a pond, do this and that. So people will fund it. Maybe 5,000 people will each get $50, $75, et cetera. And then over the course of the next 5 years, you can actually watch as the land progresses. And NASA releases data about pretty much every inch of Earth. And you can run algorithms on that data to say, in this particular location, there are these types of trees, there's a pond, there's et cetera. So you can actually track the progress to the initial contract that was made for that project. And so that's another kind of use of blockchain I think is very exciting. And it kind of defies the idea of not just money, but this idea that, we're adding value and creating good things in the world.
Right. Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of use cases here with the technology. Yeah. I think that's the exciting part about it. I remember kind of watching a video and trying to get an overview of what the blockchain was, and it just really reminded me of kind of like mycelial networks or something like that. Everything's connected, and there's a lot of all these checks and balances with it, where it's hard to maybe forge signatures and whatnot, where everything's kind of keeping it in line versus this whole centralized part that's keeping it in line.
Yeah, and it's a similar way to psychedelics. Actually, when I've seen a lot of people experience this. A lot of people don't experience this, but when they discover blockchain and Bitcoin and really understand what it is, it actually leads to a transformation in the way they think about the world. Because money is actually a really abstract concept. This idea that you're storing your labor and goods inside of a piece of paper or inside of digital. When you think that actually could be reinvented, I mean, the first time in 1,000 or 2,000 years, it really leads to this like kind of awakening in a way about the way the world works and the way the world can work. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's exciting and it's interesting. I don't know. Money and psychedelics is just an interesting conversation in general.
Yeah.
There seems to be a lot of conflicts between it at times, and
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Societal change too.
Yeah. I guess we're even talking about two disruptive technologies, right? In some sense, like psychedelics really kind of disrupting thought patterns and helping us like understand things differently. And then you have this blockchain technology it seems to be doing the same thing at times, like really kind of disrupting systems that have been centralized for so long.
Definitely.
Trying to create new neural pathways here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I'm kind of curious, like with this idea of super intelligence and just the evolution of technology, like what do you see some of the pros and cons here if we start to develop one of these super intelligent, aware machines?
Yeah, I mean, well, so I think I see a lot of the challenges in, first of all, in this period now, between now and when superintelligence emerges. AI obviously is going to get more and more powerful, and corporations and governments will do everything they can to have the power. And ultimately, It'd be nice to think that corporations and governments will do the best thing with that power and, keep us all happy and so forth. But at the end of the day, we know how that goes and how history goes and so forth. So I don't think I think the next 10 years are going to be especially challenging. And I think it's especially important that we try to wrestle control of the development of AI away from closed systems into open systems so that something emerges. At the, in Dear Machine, I kind of put out this idea that of a super aware intelligent machine. So often they talk about the singularity and super intelligence. I want to talk about this additional feature I think would be inherent in any super intelligence is that it would also be super aware. So where humans, we have difficulty in kind of pulling together the data and stuff that we need in order to make the smartest decisions, whether it's about the food that we eat, the plastic that we use, et cetera, and trying to understand kind of the supply chains that kind of bring all that stuff to us and understanding the impact on the environment, on our microbes in our belly and so forth. Presumably, superintelligence wouldn't have any of those limitations and would be able to use all of that data at the time that it needs it. So I think of this idea as super awareness. My hope is that this kind of function or feature of AI and of superintelligence will be the leading thing that we see rise to the top, and that kind of helps us really change our world in a positive way. In other words, making us in a way that super intelligent so that or super aware so that we can make use of all that data and so forth, and we can shape our world in a more effective way and so forth. But there remains a possibility that, as things grow, that government will kind of wrestle control of this stuff. Corporations will, dark actors will, et cetera, and it could go in a negative direction. I think in the end, good will win and bad will lose, because that's how history has trended. We're seeing now the least number of deaths and so forth, least number of deaths from war and so forth, more than any other time in the past few hundred years. So my hope is that we continue to do that and we continue to have this awakening that we're seeing right now, and that AI and super awareness is kind of a part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so interesting to think about like what the future could look like with all this stuff. I guess I'm guessing you don't think that AI or the super intelligence could destroy us. I know some people are really worried about it, and that whole idea that it could like maybe become, I don't know if it's self-aware is the right term, but just be able to really, have a really negative impact or start controlling us in odd ways.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why I came to the conclusion that wouldn't so the one thing I believe is that superintelligence will emerge not inside of a box at a corporation and at the control, under the control of a corporation or government, but rather through our public systems, and will therefore kind of will be an extension of all the systems that we're currently creating. They're all the AI systems that we're currently creating. So everything from making our transportation more efficient, making disease detection, mental health detection, helping people, all this stuff that's kind of emerging now, the uses for the technology that are emerging now. There will definitely be situations where AI is used to maybe extract resources from rainforests so that nobody knows and that sort of thing. But I think in the end, as superintelligence emerges, on the whole, it will have the good. It will have the goals that are good for humanity, and the goals that are bad for humanity, such as tearing down rainforest or exploiting people, etc. Will if a superintelligence is using mathematics to kind of figure out how to best spend resources, it will have to eliminate those goals or somehow change the conditions that led to those goals. And so that's kind of how I came to the conclusion that, on the whole, it would be good for humanity. So, of course, I could be wrong, and perhaps a government or corporation will create it inside of a box, and it will be this monster, and then it'll get out somehow, and then we'll be screwed. I'm going with the good aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. Fingers crossed. It's actually funny. I went to this shamanic ceremony years ago, and it was with this Mayan shaman, and it was around 2012 2012, and so somebody asked, like, obviously, is the world coming to an end? You know, you've studied with these Mayans, and this is a Mayan prediction, and you know what's happening here. There was all that fear around, and it was just interesting. His point of view is like, you know, the Western mind is just so obsessed with apocalypse. Like, if you go, you know, date back into the religion, Christianity, and just our thought, it's like we're really obsessed with this apocalyptic vision, and we kind of dwell on it. And he's like, that's never what it meant down there. It just meant this new beginning. But it seems like in the Westerners' eyes, it's this destruction and death and apocalypse. And what could like a new beginning look like? Maybe it doesn't have to be all negative and like, oh, this is going to destroy us. It could. Yeah, you're right. Who knows? Maybe it will. But it's just interesting, our perspectives and the way we view the world, that when something new sometimes comes in, it's going to do a lot more damage. And even thinking about like psychedelics, there's still a lot of taboo around this topic. And, you know, people that don't know anything about it are a little worried. It's like, you can't legalize or decriminalize these substances. They're terrible. You know, people go crazy on them, which you know, maybe some people do. And there's definitely psychological risks there. But I think with anything new or big change, it almost brings this like kind of like negative danger kind of
definitely
to us.
I mean, we definitely are geared to kind of think of things in good and evil, and to, you know, put it in either box and not realize the actual complexity or nuances of every possible relationship or situation, etc. I agree with you on that.
So how can psychedelics help like humanity prepare for the emergence of this super intelligent entity?
Yeah, so the overarching idea that I put in Dear Machine is the idea that we, it's going to go one way or the other. What's definitely going to happen is that AI and eventually superintelligence is really going to accelerate whatever systems we have in place. So if we have, if it comes out today, I think it would be pretty ugly, because it would accelerate kind of all the crap that's happening in the world, and the rise of these despotic people and so forth. But if we create a world that is more, that appreciates the interconnectedness and the diversity and complexity of life, and the diversity and complexity of our minds and bodies and so forth, if we create systems based on that, and we're starting to see the kind of like the beginnings of that process, I think we'll be in a much better place. So psychedelics has a huge role to play, because it allows us to see actually how things work in a better way. It allows us to see the interconnectedness of systems. It allows us to kind of appreciate things that we have trouble appreciating, because our our egos get in the way, and our kind of simplistic, if you think about addiction, it's a pretty simplistic loop that somebody has in their brain that's causing them to continue to smoke nicotine or alcohol, et cetera. And psychedelics just breaks that. And then, we're seeing this huge success rate with those things, because because that simplistic loop gets broken, and people kind of wake up and see that things are different. So I see that capacity having huge implications for the emergence of AI and superintelligence and so forth. I think probably, I'd say that capacity is one of the most powerful capacities of it in general. And it also kind of, research has shown, again, as you said, it helps us see, develop our relationships better with each other, with nature, but it also leads to people disbelieving the lies that government and corporations tell us that we need to disbelieve in order to evolve.
Right. Yeah. I had a thought and it just escaped my mind. I'm sorry.
I think yeah.
No, it happens from time to time. It's it makes me think about like the influence that psychedelics have had in a sense on like the internet, and even in technology, somebody like Steve Jobs, and just even listening to like old Terrence McKenna talks when he's talking about the internet, that we're going to have these virtual little spaces where you can like interact in. And back then it was like so innovative, and, some of these thought leaders in that maybe influencing it in a sense. And what was that guy? Bruce something. He was friends with Terrence, but he was really big in the internet world as well. And just really interesting to see that the counterculture also has this kind of influence, or has had some sort of influence in the development of these things.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I think there's a reason why all this stuff kind of came out of California, like the technology's coming out of California, and that's where a lot of psychedelics and stuff were happening as well. So that's definitely not a coincidence.
Yeah. And it reminds me, just thinking about the integration of all this, I always come back to this Terence McKenna. He was talking in one of his talks about, the being able to be rooted back in nature, kind of living like a simple life, but then having that technology behind the eye to, this, forget how he described it, but just having that interface behind the eye, but also living in this really nature-based world. And, I don't know, the technology piece scares me a little bit. I'm like, would I want something like that behind my eye and interacting with my brain? But also some of the simplicity that it might bring, right? Like freeing up simple tasks that are just repetitive that maybe we don't need to do, where you could have some sort of machine automate that and really help us get back to more creative aspects of life. Maybe more time for gardening. That takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And it's like, if I didn't have to do all this stuff, I'd probably be attending to my gardening a lot more.
Yeah, for sure. And maybe detecting the types of weeds and stuff you have and telling you which needs to be pulled and so forth if you don't know right away. But yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a little scared of that aspect as well, of having something in my brain and so forth. But I think eventually, I think it's inevitable that it'll help us in many different ways. I'll let other people go through the testing phase when little accidents happen and some people go crazy or whatever. But
I think Elon Musk is working on something like that right now, right?
Yeah, they just announced in the past couple of days that they're going to try to start doing something. With the first application being simply moving a mouse or something with your brain. So you'd have an implant and you'd be able to, instead of using your hand, you'd be able to move a mouse around on the screen and that sort of thing. But I think eventually, yeah, of course, the idea is that you'd be able to, with your brain, ask a question and get an answer without ever opening your mouth or opening your eyes or whatever.
Right. That's pretty wild.
Yeah. Definitely brings up a lot of questions and ideas and fears and et cetera.
Yeah. So with my background with mental health, and I think we chatted about this when I chatted with Sam Gandy, I used to work in a residential home with at-risk teenagers, and this technology piece is really interesting. Like some of the social dynamics of people just saying, like, I don't make connections in school. A lot of my stuff is just online. I have a lot of online communities, and seeing almost like this disconnection with like human relationship at time, because we're so focused on these virtual worlds that we can connect with. On one side, it's awesome because, it's like, we get to connect and I get to connect with so many different people and find the others in a sense. It's like, oh, wow, like didn't have this 20 years ago to be able to just connect with so many like-minded people all the time. But then also how is that affecting us in our daily lives of maybe making connections when, you're at dinner and everybody around you is on their smartphone and doing stuff. So I always wonder about that implication there and how that might affect us down the line of actually creating authentic connections, because I think this is a problem right now with like loneliness and just kind of like disconnecting at times. Like the connection piece I think is huge. And I was just chatting about this last night on a call with our breathwork teachers. We had a group call, and just the concept of touch and how like our culture is like almost really afraid of touch, and especially now with the climate, it's like you have to be really careful with it. This conversation was just in regard to doing body work, and how has maybe technology influenced that as well? No,
I think it's really interesting that it's just such a hard problem right now. I mean, everybody I know knows about that problem, that spending too much time on a smartphone and not connecting enough, but people continue to do it. So hopefully, I don't know, maybe that's something I think further development technology can help with, to help us become a little less addicted to things and really show us what we really, really want and need. But that's a problem that I'm not too sure where that's going to end up. Hopefully not leading to, increased isolation and so forth. I mean, I do have hope in terms of the ability to kind of connect. And I think more people are going to do events and experiences and so forth together. So you really, because that seems to be what people are drawn to, is to coming together and with like-minded people and so forth. But that's in its infancy as well now. Hopefully that continues to grow and people continue to meet up and so forth and use the technology in that way.
Yeah, I definitely see that as a growing trend. I mean, especially I'm in the wellness area, and that just does seem like a growing thing. And even in the breathwork circles of just this idea of group process coming together as a group to share an experience is really powerful. And I think something that maybe this whole process is teaching us is, oh, wow, we do get really disconnected at time with technology, and how can we find the balance here?
Yeah. Cool.
So anything else about your book that you want to highlight?
I guess I would just, if I were to summarize, in case somebody doesn't want to read it. Well, first of all, I do make it available on my website for free in PDF form. Somebody wants to get it in paperback or audio, they can do that. But I like to always just highlight the ideas. And the idea is simply that, with AI coming out in the coming years, we know that monoculturization has led to a lot of bad things in the world. It obviously led to a lot of good things as well, but a lot of negative impacts. And if there's anything we can do to reverse monoculturization through increasing diversity and complexity by kind of encouraging, investing, embracing innovations in this area, it would be beneficial to us and to our future humanity to do that, so that AI kind of emerges with the values that we wanted to emerge with. And so that's my overarching idea.
Awesome. Thank you. Something else I guess popped in my mind about all of this is a quote from Buckminster Fuller is like, don't try to change the system, just make another system, make the system obsolete. And, I always wonder too, when these new systems come into play, some of the resistance as well of maybe accepting it and being like, is this good?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, if you think about our current system, the core of the current system is this idea of shareholder value. Pretty much not every single person, but a high percentage of Americans are invested in mutual funds, and those mutual funds contain thousands of companies, and those thousands of companies all really look at one metric, and that's shareholder value. So the question is, how can we get away from that system? And that's going to be extremely difficult because you have all these corporations and governments, et cetera, that are highly dependent on this idea that this is the way that we proceed through life. But we have to find a way to get an additional or two more metrics, I believe. One is human well-being, and the other is environmental stability. If we somehow get those metrics into into the public consciousness, into the public discourse, and so forth, we could be in a much better place to kind of evolve things. If we don't succeed at doing that, there's definitely going to be a fight between the kind of new way of thinking and the old way of thinking, which is kind of happening already anyway.
Yeah.
But I don't see how, the problem is scale, and to scale the things that we're doing or like that we have the intention of doing, and, and kind of people who are trying to change things and so forth. Ultimately, we have to change that core structure. And I think additional metrics are absolutely necessary to do that.
Yeah, the sustainability and like just overall well-being. Do you think that's possible within this capitalistic society that we live in, when it's just looking at maybe numbers and maybe not taking into account sustainability?
I think it it might take another generation or two, but and I think it'll take the collapse of certain segments of society, which is already kind of starting to happen in a way. So I think with every collapse that happens, economic collapse, et cetera, there's a new opportunity. And I think we'll see a lot of these things get tested in places like Africa and South America and stuff, where they don't have really strong regulations against a lot of the financial stuff and so forth. And they also have, big distances in between their towns and not good infrastructure, et cetera. So I think we'll see a lot of this stuff get tested in other places. For example, in Kenya, they've been using mobile money for years now, where you can just go into a store and you just text message and you essentially send money to the shopkeeper for the goods that you bought. And so that's run through a company in Kenya, but that sort of thing would never have would have never succeeded in America because of all the regulations and so forth. And it's still very difficult to do something like that. So I think we'll see that kind of stuff grow in other places, and hopefully we can kind of latch onto that and try to transform America and Europe and Asia into places that are a little harder to evolve.
Right. Yeah, I think actually Joe covered that a little bit on a previous podcast where they talked about blockchain and cryptocurrency and how, places like in Africa and whatnot are actually utilizing this. And that's actually where it could actually grow and really evolve because those structures aren't there. And, it's great technology to get them going.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah. So, you have this interest in psychedelics. So I'm curious, how did you get interested in psychedelics? And, I know that you have some investments, or you've invested some money into some of the research there. So what got you started becoming interested in this?
Yeah, so I guess maybe 5 or 7 years ago now, I kind of just, I was invited to a couple ceremonies near New York, psilocybin mushrooms initially. And I was aware of what the capacity was and so forth. And, kind of a science nerd. I read the science behind all this stuff. Science still was very preliminary then, except of all the stuff that happened in the 60s and so forth. But then I just really, after getting into it, obviously it just clicks. You're like, oh, this is what it is. You really don't understand what it is. You think drugs, you think, obviously had smoked weed before then and so forth, but you really don't understand what psychedelics are until you actually take them. And at that point it clicked. And so then I started looking at all the different applications for it. When I had started my own thing and I left my job and I started doing some investing, I was looking around for companies and I found the one, Compass Pathways, that's doing the psilocybin for treatment-resistant depression. And I became an investor there. And so that was kind of my first step into the realm of investing in the psychedelics realm.
Yeah.
And now I'm just kind of looking around to see what else is going on. And, I'm not just psychedelics isn't my only investment area. I'm also in microbiome stuff. I'm also in getting into regenerative agriculture and that sort of thing as well.
Yeah, I was on your site just looking at some of your mission and the things that you have been looking at. And psychedelics is just one of really other cool things, with the agriculture and the ecology stuff.
Yeah.
And, that's awesome. So I don't know how much you can talk about this, but Compass within, I guess, the community here there's a little bit of worrying of ooh, what are they doing? There's guess some fear of this, I don't know.
Big pharma kind of fears,
big pharma kind of monopoly on the synthesis process, because I guess they will own that. And so, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that? Maybe you didn't know about it before investing, or where are you at now with that? And I haven't been staying up on top of Compass too much, so I don't know if things have changed.
Yeah, my general philosophy. So I would say I'm a little bit concerned about that aspect of things, but my general philosophy is that the main problem with the health system is that we get into the idea of patenting molecules, and therefore nobody else can use this molecule and so forth. And since psilocybin, the molecule cannot be patented, I'm not so concerned about it. So yes, the process of creating. I'm not a fan of patents in general and the patent system in general and how it excludes, but at the same time, I would really like to see scale, right? How many millions of people. Speed and scale. How many millions of people are suffering from depression and addiction and all these things that psilocybin and other psychedelics can help with? So I saw it then, and I still see it as the fastest route to get things to scale. I don't think, I know a lot of the MAP studies are seeing a lot of progress now. I think that wasn't so much the case when I first started, but still, I think the scale is a huge issue, and I think having a company that can roll that up is very important. And I have a lot of confidence in Compass. I'm also excited that what's happening with the way they're doing it is in order to be a part of a study or to a therapist that kind of oversees the therapy, they also have to go through the therapy themselves.
Right.
So if you think about psilocybin, its potential to allow people to see how things actually work and so forth, and see the interconnectedness of things. We actually have all these people in hospitals and clinicians, so forth, that are actually going through trips in kind of a clinical environment. But so that part is exciting to me, because just more people taking psychedelics and becoming aware of how it works and how their own brain works and how and how the rest of the world works, et cetera. But also, I like Compass's path with regards to their approach with regards to how they're developing the intervention. They're not just testing the molecule; they're testing the whole entire process, which involves the room, the color of the walls, the plants in a room, how the therapists are trained, the music that's playing, or all that stuff. So they're essentially testing what everybody has always talked about, set and setting.
Right.
And that's different from, how pharma typically works. Pharma typically works, they want to scale up a single molecule, mass produce it millions of times, and get people hooked on it so that they can continue to do that. And then the other aspect is that psilocybin so far has shown that it's a single treatment resolves a lot of the issues and conditions and so forth. And so it's not a recurring kind of revenue stream. In order to keep the revenue stream going, they would have to continue to solve people's problems. So they're highly incentivized to continue to do that. With all that said, I respect a lot of the people in the psychedelics community who are pushing back and who are scared of having big pharma and so forth involved in this process. But I don't see how Compass kind of falls into that category. The founders are very, very mission aligned with the work because of personal situations and so forth as well.
Yeah. Yeah. If anybody's interested in that, you could definitely search some articles. I know, there's, I think Symposium might have put out an article or two about it, but yeah, there's definitely some backstories there with some people within the community, which has raised some red flags about people being 100% supporting that. But I mean, you bring up a good point here about like scale, right? And to do these large scale studies and to really collect a lot of data, you need a good system and a lot of money. As you pointed out, like you don't think MAPS was like able to do this a while ago, and Rick has been working on this since the 80s, and it's taking millions of dollars and so much time, and now we're really starting to see all of his hard work get poured into this and the results. And it's like, yeah, it's this tricky thing of, oh, here's another player coming in, what are they going to do? And they might have this patent on the synthesis process, and I think that's scary for a lot of people. But on the flip side, we think about human suffering, and here's some treatments that need to get studied, and here's an opportunity. And I think it's just scary when there's so much money involved there, and like what could happen. And I think on the kind of like the maybe shamanic side of things, the single molecule, these are sacred compounds, and bring back the plant in a sense, and these are sacred. Why does it need to be tied up with so much money when these things were traditionally free or didn't cost much?
And I'm a big fan of the whole organism idea, the idea that perhaps it's not just psilocybin that's making shrooms effective. Maybe there are other molecules. Obviously, there probably are, just like with weed and so forth, and not just THC. But again, it just our health industry just requires very precise studies of things and so forth. And as much as we can get these things into common culture, I think we'll see more kind of a more evolution approach and a more use of the whole organism. But as long as we know that we have this huge massive problem of people in big cities and depressed by the millions and so forth, I think we really need to try to go to scale as quickly as possible.
Right. Yeah. And, the ecological crisis, we need some creative problem solving. I think we need healing, and we might need new novel approaches to treating mental health and all the things that are going on. And it seems like psychedelics, have a pretty good track record so far. What the research is pointing to interconnectedness and mental health disorders, and even the concept of dying, right? Being able to prepare for death and face dying. I think that's a huge topic in itself, and death is somewhat taboo to speak about in our culture. And what would it actually be like to prepare for death? I think our lives would be a little bit different. I come back to a quote that I think about often is, how we prepare to die is how we live our life, and how we live our life is how we prepare to die. And, if you really thought about that and meditated that every day, what would your life look like?
Totally different, right?
Very different.
Yeah.
And, psychedelics. And when we were chatting with Dr. Catherine McLean, I mean, she brought this up because she worked on those studies at Johns Hopkins. We could die at any moment. And who says that, it just needs to be for terminally ill? And, what would it be like to prepare even earlier than that? Just to have those perspectives shifted.
Yeah, it's interesting, the research that talks about the end-of-life application of psilocybin, right? And how it relieves that anxiety that people have of dying and so forth, which is, it speaks to a lot to the potential of the molecule, right? Like if somebody who's dying, is terminally ill, they're going to die in 3 months or 6 months, and suddenly their anxiety about that goes away, really says a lot.
Yeah. Yep. And I sometimes wonder, like with the technology in healthcare, how that is actually interconnected with our perception of death. We prolong life longer, even though suffering continues and might be even worse, but there's this idea that we need to prolong it, even though suffering is increasing.
Yeah. For sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I think psychedelics might, have a huge potential here for a lot of different things.
I agree.
What do you feel excited about within the psychedelic world?
I'd say addiction more than anything. Opioid addiction. Unfortunately, I had a personal loss on the opioid addiction front. It's just my sister. I think that potential, and knowing how many tens of thousands of people die of opioid addictions every year, and the potential for that transformation to happen. So I want to see that happen as quickly as possible, obviously. The amount of suffering and, you just can't even imagine, like families that are broken apart and so forth from that stuff. And then, of course, alcohol and tobacco and all that stuff as well.
Yeah.
There's these compounds out there that have been kind of enslaving people for a long time, and there's an opportunity to change that. So.
Do you know if anybody has started looking at that study of opioid and psychedelics? I know NYU is doing MDMA and alcoholism, and there's a few.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure specifically of what's happening on that front. I know there's potential there, and I've heard some studies, but I don't know exactly where I heard that. It got in my head somehow that it's a strong potential for nicotine, alcohol, and opioids. But I'm not quite sure how that got into my head.
Yeah. Well, I think the one thing that's been focused on with addiction specifically is Ibogaine. And there's a lot of stuff that was happening in Mexico and still is up in British Columbia because it's legal there. But that seems to be the one that is studied the most for opioid disorders. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I'm happy to see any and all psychedelics to be studied and so forth. And just to state my intention on this, the investment I made is really don't care if I, make a big return on my investment or whatever on that front. Obviously I'm very mission aligned with getting this type of work funded and so forth. So that's why I wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah, and thank you for that. It's such important work, and I think a lot of people don't realize how much time and energy and money actually goes in to fund a lot of these studies. And we need all these resources if we want to make these medicines available. It's just the system we live in, right? Like we need to go through FDA-approved studies and test the safety of it and really run people through it. And unfortunately, that takes a lot of money. And I think that's where a lot of people get scared is where's the money coming from? But at the same time, it's like, what happened to the goal of just trying to eliminate suffering and come up with new medications? Because I know there's a lot of I guess, like opinions about the medical model versus like kind of decriminalizing it and keeping it more indigenous and whatnot.
Yeah, I think I mean I think we need all the approaches now, at least, and hopefully the more hopefully the cultural model will rise to the top, right? And that we embrace it as a culture, we understand it as a culture, and understand the potential, use them in the right settings at the right times to help people along and to kind of help, human evolution more than necessarily just kind of making money on them and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Agreed. We're about at an hour or so. Is there anything that you want to close with, or any topic that we didn't touch on that you really wanted to highlight?
I just I'm really excited about the microbiome and its connection to everything. I think your listeners, I think you obviously have a lot of listeners who are interested in psychedelics. They probably are already up to the wisdom on the microbiome, but if there's any other area that I would look into, very deeply, it would be the microbiome in your gut and all the connections it has to your mental health, your physical health, to your skin, to autoimmune disorders, to everything. I think it would be something that your audience would be very interested in learning about if they haven't already.
Any good resources for that if people want to learn more?
Yeah, there's actually, so there's a subreddit, and there aren't too many people on the subreddit, but it's Reddit r/human microbiome. And it's really just a catalog of all the research that happens in this space. And there's this really diligent person that's on there that really is like there trying to make sure all the knowledge is in place and it's named correctly and so forth. I would just dig in on that and just be prepared to be blown away about all the different things that are happening inside of your gut and inside of your digestive system that are impacting your moods, your appetite, your pretty much everything. I
was going to ask, like, what's the most exciting thing, but it sounds like, mood, gut.
I would say the most exciting piece of research that came out recently is with regards to fecal therapies. I don't know if you've heard of this. So they found there's an autism study underway. That went underway. And so essentially what happened was, this is at Arizona State University. A bunch of people with autism were given this transplant from healthy people. And they saw over the course of 2 years after the transplants, significant remission of symptoms, autism symptoms. So like significant, not like little, but like a lot of the associated stuff that folks on autism have. There's always been a gut connection. So there seems to be some very strong connection between the microbes that somebody has in their stomach and their autism, or the degree of autism that they have. And I found that very interesting. And in general, I find that particular therapy very interesting, human microbiota transplant, and it's one that I actually invested in as well.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
it's so interesting. I went to a talk that this woman, Dr. Joan Borisenko, I think that's what her name is. But it was all about mental health and gut connection, and stating that we have like 3 to 5 pounds of gut biome, like how that really influences our mental health, influences depression, anxiety, and all this other stuff. And I agree. I think there's definitely something there, and it's a super fascinating field.
Yeah, for sure. Very exciting.
Yeah, a lot of potential there. And actually, in your book, I remember hearing that our society has kind of been built around, say, agriculture, and then some of those plants really decreasing nutrient intake, like wheats and stuff like that. And that's just a really interesting idea with gut biome. And, a lot of the foods that we eat might actually not be great for our gut, but our culture and society is surrounded by it. And actually, what is that doing to our mental health in general?
Yeah. And I think, as we evolved and we went from hunter-gatherers to farmers, we definitely narrowed our diets very significantly, and there were impacts on our health and so forth. I think it would be almost impossible to do science in this realm at this point, but it's clear it seems clear to me that our microbiomes changed dramatically during that period, and that perhaps was part of the the reason for the degraded health and so forth. But there's this idea of prebiotic foods that's emerging now, which is something that I think a lot of people should look into. It's this idea that not just probiotics, we're putting kind of bacteria in your system from yogurt and from pills and so forth, but prebiotics, you're feeding the good bacteria in your stomach. So certain foods are better for doing that than others. And it tends to be more leafy greens and root vegetables and that sort of thing than it is like grains and wheats and so forth.
Awesome. Anything that you want to close with? Any last words of wisdom?
It's just thank you to you and to everybody out there that is tuning into this kind of stuff.
Awesome. Thank you. And again, just really quick, how can people find you online? And I know you said you had a free PDF of the book as well. So yeah, your online presence, where can people find you at?
Sure. So my website is supersystemic.ly. And you can browse through to from the menu to get to Dear Machine. And from there, you can get the PDF from there. And there's also a mailing list and so forth if you want to sign up for further updates of upcoming exciting stuff I might have going.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Greg. Thanks for your time. Really enjoyed chatting with you, and we'll talk soon.
You as well. Have a great day.
All right. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed listening to that episode with Greg Kieser. Have any thoughts, comments, whatever? You can send us an email, psychedelicstoday, email@gmail. I also want to give people heads up on the email. If you sent us an email in the past and we haven't responded to you, chances are probably got lost in our inbox, and for some reason our email notoriously just routes things into our spam folder. So I go in there and check the spam folder, but things do fall through the cracks. So if you sent us an email, you haven't heard back from us, we get busy, things get lost, and then that whole spam folder thing. So yeah, feel free to reach back out and we'll be happy to connect with you. Be sure you subscribe, Psychedelics Today, on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. And yeah, if you're interested in any services, we offer some consulting services to integration services. So whether or not you're planning on taking a trip or you had an experience and you're just trying to make meaning out of it, figure out what to do with it, really make meaning out of that experience that you probably have a hard time putting into words, we're here to help and support you. So if you go over to Psychedelics Today, we have a tab for services, consulting, and integration, and we'll be happy to serve you, help you anyway, whether that's answering questions about any, psychedelic-related things, or if you're just really trying to work through an experience that you had or prepare for it, we're here to support you. If you're interested in also supporting us, and you are planning a trip, or, maybe you had one and you're trying to work through it. If you aren't interested in any integration services, you can check out our Navigating Psychedelics Trip Journal and Integration Workbook. You can find those on Amazon. Go over to Amazon, type in Psychedelics Today in the search bar, and you can order a physical copy. If you don't want to get a physical copy, you can download a PDF version. Those are over at psychedelicstodayshop.com. So those are up on our online store. It's a PDF download. So you just click download, or you click it, you buy it, and then you'll get an email with the download on there. So 2 ways to get those journals and integration workbooks, Amazon or on our shop. We also have some cool t-shirts up there. I've been developing some etymology t-shirts, so I think there's one for psychedelic and psychonaut. So fun way to do a little bit of education about some of the root words of what we chat about. So awesome. Thanks everybody again for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.